Welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast.
I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sainsbury.
Well, good evening or morning or afternoon, depending on what time you're listening to us. At the time of recording, 39 days have passed and there are just 4 and a bit days left before the general election 2024 drops. And what an exciting roller coaster of a campaign it's been, with twists and turns, and I don't even believe it myself. How are you, Simon?
Well, it's certainly been a journey. 39 days in. It's 39 days since Rishi and the rain. Well, things can only get wetter as the as the podcast goes. But yes, only 4 sleeps till Votemas. If that's, or it might actually be less sleeps if you're a political campaigner, because you might not have the luxury of sleeping. So
yeah, and I guess we ought to acknowledge that. Again, we watch the TV debates and we read the national headlines, but at a local level, those of you that follow any kind of political campaigner will know that shoe leather by this stage is wearing thin. The various injuries from miles accumulated are being strapped up for that final push, and I guess with it being sort of late June, early July, it's more daylight hours to go out campaigning. So I think a busy week to come for most of our local politicos.
Yeah, it's the final run-in. But as we were kind of sharing before, at this point, it's a case of making sure that the people that you think or have told you that they're going to vote for you, making sure they get off their arse and vote, rather than changing anybody's mind at this point. I think, not that, I mean, actually, I'd be interested to hear if anybody has actually changed their mind, because I've not seen much evidence of that. Mind you, the polls say otherwise, don't they? So I must be talking complete nonsense. That's not normal.
Yeah, and we'll come to the polls at the end, and a few statistics to again, predicting the result on this one is perhaps not in the realms of Mystic Meg or casting the runes, if all the stats are to be believed. But we'll have a little play with that at the end. So I guess to get us started, Simon, shall we have a little look back on what I think most people acknowledge it's not been the most exciting general election campaign that we've ever witnessed?
No, and to be fair, the team that had one thing to hold over all the other teams, which was when to bloody call the damn thing, they seem to be the ones least prepared for when it was actually called.
Well, yeah, and I think this kind of speaks to the whole haphazard nature of the campaign. So, take us back to the beginning and a slightly dark night in Downing Street, with the rain pouring down.
Well, yeah, if we can cast our minds back all the way to the 22nd of May, the PM doing his very, very best impression of a scene from a Richard Curtis movie, stood in the rain in front of a camera, begging the country to love him, and with someone else shouting from the sidelines. So, which, to be fair, is something he's probably used to from his term in office. So, yeah, talks lots of basically the risk of what he called the risk of to the country of a Labour government and Keir Starmer not having a plan, which seemed like a strange thing to claim for a man that didn't have a plan to hold a meeting inside or have an umbrella. But nonetheless, that was his claim, and that kind of kicked it off. And everybody then went, "Oh, okay, finally, we've been saying for weeks that you should call an election. You've now called an election. We're off to the races. You've already been to speak to His Majesty the King, who's basically approved the dissolution of Parliament and the calling of a general election, and then kind of everybody was off. then it was the mad scramble for everybody to try and find candidates. I'm trying to remember when was the was it really the 24th? No, that's not right. Not wasn't the 24th of May, surely. It was the 7th of June. Sorry, I'm losing my. I didn't put that on my little calendar. I've just realised. So I'll throw up my little calendar and see. So yeah, 22nd of May. Then the next kind of really significant thing was you'd think that you'd want to be kind of starting from the gates with a fantastic, amazing, overwhelming policy that's well thought out. But what he comes out with on the 26th was announcing the national service scheme for 18-year-olds. That 30,000 of which will be places that they can apply for to join the armed forces. The next week is a bit kind of tied up with there's some talk about will or won't Diane Abbott be allowed back into the Labour Party? Will or won't she be standing as a candidate in wherever she would be standing? I'm trying desperately not to mention the constituency so that we don't have to list all of the candidates.
List the candidates, yes. So wherever she's standing, and I
wherever
think
she may have been standing. That then seemed to kind of take up the next full week. But then as we entered June, we very, very quickly forgot it, because on the 3rd of June, Nigel Farage, having been on Question Time on the Thursday the week before, saying, "I'm not going to be entering this. I'm not the leader of the part of I nearly called them Rejoin then of Reform. This is Tice's fight. I'm not going to be a candidate in this election." Then on the 3rd, did the I couldn't let my country down. I had to stand, and basically took over the party stroke company that he's the major shareholder of.
Yeah, and I guess, there is an element in if you just look at those kind of three key points. I guess the Conservatives trying to get a very traditional Conservative message out was largely received. You got a tepid response, didn't it? Again, it's national service, and a few folks in their 80s were like, "Yeah, get them into the army or do them." And then it was like, well, it's not actually that. Well, what is it? Oh, okay. Well, it's encouraging folk to volunteer, and it's like, well, what happens if they don't want to? Well, detail. Move on from that. So it was kind of a bit of a damp squib. The Labour Party, I guess, were, not really saying very much, and I think the Diane Abbott story sort of ran along in the background. I don't know whether it's on your little calendar, but at that point, had Ed Davies started, popping a wheelie and jumping through a hoop of burning fire?
I haven't listed because I felt if I started listing the Ed Davey media grabbing gimmicks, then I would have to start listing everyone else's. And frankly,
So
frankly, I didn't think that would kind of work. It's a very lazy graphic. I'm just doing a screen share of a calendar, but from a perspective of no, I haven't kind of done those. But
I think we're safe to assume that there would have been an Ed Davey moment in that week, and then of course, Nigel and Reform strides forward with it. No, let me speak. We want this, to be all about me and Clacton, and I guess probably if we look at the kind of the campaign as a whole, probably the Reform campaign, the Reform narrative has probably got more airtime than most, particularly if we look at our friendly local political site, Portsmouth Politics. And I'll use the word antics of Reform probably has generated more conversational points than any of the other parties.
Well, I mean, it's certainly. I mean, if people weren't thinking that that Sunak's campaign got off to a bad start before then. There were, and again, I didn't put this on my calendar. He'd done a press thing at the Harland and Wolff shipyard where famously the Titanic was built. So he was really kind of off to a great start. And if he thought that maybe there was a chance that things couldn't go, that maybe he's got off to a bit of a slow start despite having the home advantage, then maybe he can kind of recover that and kind of turn that around. Then Farage kind of entering the fray kind of, I think, put post to that. And I'm gonna, because you've bloody gone and mentioned the constituency, I'm going to have to list the candidates in Clacton now. Thanks.
I think you are allowed to reference the website.
Well,
that's what
if
the
that's the
BBC
case,
do.
okay. Well,
the BBC will say the list of all of the candidates for Clacton are available on the BBC website.
There's a QR code in the top left-hand corner of the screen, which goes to a website called Who Can I Vote For? If you want to find out who the candidates are, then you can find those from whocanIvotefor.co.uk, or you can literally just Google it like any other sane person. But okay, well, we'll do that and see whether.
Should I just start listing random towns?
No, you can't, because I'll just move your bloody microphone.
Okay.
See what I have to put up with, dear listener.
Exactly. So lackluster campaign.
Yes.
Nigel comes on board.
June.
Where do we go?
So
next?
June the 4th, the gambling scandal starts getting revealed. So it's not looking great. The Sunak versus Starmer ITV debate happens first that evening. That was the one where they only had 45 seconds to respond. So it was very shouty, very bullet point, very three-word slogans.
I guess if we pause for a second there, Simon, the TV debate, and there've been several of them. There was the head-to-head. There was the all 7 in a row, although obviously Kia and Rishi subbed in some folk for that one.
That was the first one of those was later that week. By the way, your screen's frozen.
Oh, sorry. I guess if we think about that, do you think they make any difference at all? Or, are they just simply kind of a buffet for the politicos and the people who want to write headlines the next morning?
I wonder the same thing. I wonder whether there's anybody that has a different opinion at the end of a debate than what they had at the start of it, or at least has a different voting intention at the end of it than they had at the start of it. If anything, I'd have thought that the grand kind of theme was, and to be fair, some formats seem to work better for Sunak than they did for Starmer in the first one. My personal opinion was that I don't think Starmer kind of quite warmed to it. He allowed Sunak to basically get too much ground of literally with his headline type slogans and basically just kind of barraging him and kind of putting his points across that way. So I think that one seemed to work quite well for Sunak. But the others, when you got into the sevens, I was trying not to cut. They're not really Snow White and the 7 also rans. There was just such a combative there was a lot of confrontation between Penny Mordaunt and Angela Rayner. There was a lot of over talking and kind of fighting between them, and a lot of the others were pretty much. And I think it was was it Carla Denyer that commented at one point, well, this is could the rest of us actually get a word in edgewise, please? This is kind of not really a great example. It was either her or the leader of the SNP. So forgive me if I've got that around the way. Yeah. Again, I don't think anybody came out of that a winner. I don't think anybody came out of that convinced. And if anything, 7 was a lot to try and get onto a platform and allow them actually to speak without them having to. I think it's just there's just too many. It's just a crowded kind of floor. But then you get the whole
Yeah.
argument of, well, the SNP are the third largest party in the UK by number of MPs, so they should have representation on a national stage, even though I'm sure they've got lots to contribute to that it's worth perhaps voters in the rest of the UK hearing. No one actually in England or Wales or Northern Ireland can vote for them, and the same to a much lesser extent for Plaid Cymru. So yeah, I don't know, but I don't know that the people organising the debates could really do it any other way. So I don't know that. I think they're a thing that we've imported from America that we think to be an exciting thing, and I think it's one of those things of we possibly should have. We might regret what we wished for.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same position as you. I watched a few of them. There were some I couldn't watch because they were just too shouty and nonsensical. I thought the one where they basically brought, I think it was Ed Davey, Sakia, and then Rishi on sort of in a sequence. I thought that, the sort of Ask the Leader. I thought that was better.
Yeah, that was the BBC Question Time one on the 20th.
Yeah, but I felt that I'm as you say, I think it's it's a bit American, isn't it? Because again, as we've touched on, we're not voting for a president. The only way that you could vote for Sir Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak is if you happen to be in their constituency, and you can find a list of all the other candidates on the interweb. Wherever their constituencies might be.
Yes.
So there is that element of, whilst the national issues are paramount, I don't think we get very much from.
No, I don't think
I
don't think anybody learns anything from them. I think all it does is reinforce the opinions of the people that were going to vote for you anyway. And the people that weren't going to vote for you or definitely were anti-voting for you, it convinces them that they're right. I don't think anybody changes their mind. So, but maybe it serves a purpose of reminding your base to bloody vote. Maybe the aim
possibly. What else?
Politicians isn't to change anybody's mind. In the same way that anybody going to a football match, no one goes there and thinks, "Oh, do you know what? The other team played really well today. I think I should give them a round of applause for them doing really well." No, no one does that. I guess. Not been a while since I've been to a football match, but I'm assuming that's not how it happens.
It's
right.
No, it's not your long suit. So what else you got on your calendar?
So the rest of that week, the 6th of June, of course, that was the day that Sunak came home early from the D-Day celebrations. Commemorations, beg your pardon. To attend a pre-recorded interview. The 7-way debate on Sky was on the 7th. The seven luminaries from various political parties on the 7th. And then the following week, we started to get the manifestos. So we got the Lib Dem manifesto on the 10th. We got the Green manifesto on the 12th. And on that night, we also had a Sky debate of Sunak versus Starmer. We had the Labour manifesto on the 13th. Nice birthday present, I guess. And the Conservative manifesto was on the 14th. The Reform contract, they were the last of the UK-wide parties to produce their manifesto. They produced theirs on the 17th, which was odd because they already had their document actually published as a draft document. Their contract, as they called it. I haven't done a kind of comparison as to what the changes are between the two documents, but weirdly enough, from a public standpoint, they at least seem to have their document further along than others. I'm sure the others just had theirs behind the scenes and weren't prepared. But again, if you had the power to call an election, I don't get why you didn't get your team to release their manifesto first.
Yeah, I think that the trouble is with all, and again, we obviously we covered the manifestos by getting the folk to talk about their own. I would say that the manifestos are always an interesting thing, aren't they? Because there is an element of if you try and put your objective head on and you sift through them, you'll find something you like in all of them.
Yeah,
Um,
but it's not Woolworths, is it? That's the problem. You can't
yeah, and that you can't, and we all
have
know
that
how
bit and
Woolworths
have that bit
ended.
and have that bit. If you could, I don't know, maybe that's the best ever argument for PR, is that you
It
can pick and
could
mix the best policies.
Yeah, it could well be. So, I would have to say of all the sort of the five major ones, apart from the Greens, I managed to find something to like in all of them, if I'm really honest. But there's obviously, I guess, the further you get from winning, the more free rein you've got to put things in your manifesto which you're never going to have to deliver on.
No.
Because at the end of the day, with all due respect to all parties, back then it was only ever going to be either Labour or the Conservatives. So, everything else is a little bit kind of we shoot for what you want, I get, or whatever you fancy. And I think we probably saw that when I think it was the Institute for Fiscal Studies
Hmm.
sort of costed them all up, and there was almost a direct correlation between the likelihood of getting elected and the size of the bill. So it was it was something where, oh yeah, no, free Fabergé eggs for all, really. So yeah,
Yeah,
I think
yeah, and again, yeah, I think there's a bit of that at play. But weirdly enough, some of the well, yeah, I think that there was a lot of tax and spend. There was more tax and spend in the Liberal Democrat manifesto and in the more so again in the Green manifesto. The reform contract seemed to be there seemed to be lots of kind of tax giveaways, but not kind of much kind of raising. So it seemed a curious question as to where
oh
but
yeah.
actually it seemed that every IFS analysis of all of the manifestos basically said, sorry, but this doesn't quite add up. Could you do your homework again?
Yeah, yeah. No, I don't think anybody got better than a D plus, I think, on any of their fiscal literacy.
Does that
So
speak to a lot of the of a need for electoral reform? Because there's a lot more regulation and legislation about how you sell basically what you put in a toothpaste commercial than there is what you put in a manifesto or indeed on a political leaflet. Maybe that's kind of it.
yeah, I think it's I think the trouble is that most people think of economics as a science, and it is, but with quite a high degree of art thrown in, because there is this element of, well, without wishing to get too geeky or boring, when you're trying to measure a system and you've got 4 or 5 different variables, many of which you don't control, then making sort of predictions about the size of the economy and the tax intake and the spend and
Mm,
there's only ever two forecasts which are lucky and wrong, and the further you get away from today, the wronger they get. So
yeah,
I think there is always going to be that element to um
yeah,
to I think probably for
mm,
me, Simon, the and this is the the Labour manifesto's lack of tax and spend, and the commitments to honour the spending commitments, to not raise any of the mainstream taxes, probably was the thing that had one of my eyebrows raised in a really kind of way, and it has brought some criticism. The leader of the Scottish Independents, who is standing in Scotland. You can get a full list of all the Scottish candidates online. This morning was kind of very much, well, Keir Starmer is sticking to the austerity plans of the Conservatives. So I guess that was probably for me the biggest shock of all the manifestos.
yeah. I think I, I wasn't surprised by the. I mean, sorry, I know we've kind of done the conversation about the manifestos, but I wasn't kind of surprised about the themes that were in them. There weren't, not being funny. there weren't things in any of them that I thought, oh my God, I wouldn't have thought you would have put that in your manifesto. But I do think if you had the time to create a game show of basically display a manifesto policy, and see if people can guess correctly which party it came from, for some of the really obvious ones, I think people would easily get right. But for some of the others, I do think there's some stuff in the weeds that people won't quite kind of attribute to the right party. But that's the thing is, like you were saying earlier on, politicos kind of salivate over what's in the manifestos, but there aren't many people that actually read the damn things. And there are even from that, there's a subset of people that will read them and still be quite cynically of the view that well, it doesn't matter what you've put in here, because what you're actually going to do when you get into government will be completely different. And you can make the argument about events, dear boy, events, and stuff happens, and the country doesn't operate in a vacuum. There's all sorts of things that we cannot and should not control. So there is some stuff that you just can't do. If anything, it gives you a flavor of the direction they want to head in, but specific things, there's possibly only a handful of things that are really tangible cast iron policies that they must do this thing. And I think that is the fundamental, that if you fail on that level to live up to what you've promised in your manifesto, you get punished for it. And I'm looking at Liberal Democrats for that kind of bitter experience, because there are key things that you can promise and really promise over and over again not to do, and then if you do them, then quite understandably the electorate says, well, you bloody sold us a wrong, and we're not going to trust you. So
you may be picking up some background noise on my mic. I would guess, as we're recording this whilst England are playing foot to the ball, that England may have just scored by the general hysteria that's occurring in the neighbourhood.
Shortly before we went to air, there were kids screaming outside in the street, and thankfully they stopped doing that. Otherwise you'd have had to put up with the dulcet tones of someone's out of control children screaming in the background. But there we go. So yeah, that was kind of manifesto week. It was a kind of a something and nothing, but gave us all something to basically digest, look over, build some bar charts on, and kind of do some quick reviewing of, and try to bone up on a document that literally in 5 days' time for most of them is going to be completely irrelevant. Yeah. So, and then we commenced on the 17th, as I say. So reforms contract came out on the 17th. On the 18th was the register to vote deadline. The 19th was the postal vote deadline for registration. And as we mentioned earlier on, the 20th was the BBC Question Time a special leaders debate that had leaders from Conservative, Labour, SNP, and Lib Dems, and then we kind of really got into this week. There've been obviously a couple of kind of points with kind of some elements of the campaign that either do or don't kind of seem to be kind of landing that well. The whole kind of thing about the gambling thing kind of seems to come up. We seem to have completely forgotten about whatever happened to Diane Abbott, which seemed to be really important a couple of weeks ago. And then this week just gone, the proxy vote the registration for proxy votes passed, as did the deadline to apply for a voter authority certificate. So if you don't have your own photo ID, this is the first general election where you will need to have photo ID to vote in person, and you have now way past the point where you can register for a postal ballot. You've got your passport. Please do remember that if you have a passport, it just needs to look like you and have your name on it. It doesn't need to be in date. You can get full details of what photo ID will work, but in the trials, nearly 50% of the people that were turned away because they didn't have valid ID didn't end up returning to vote. So bear that in mind.
And I guess if we focus, I mean, a couple of scandals in the last week, isn't it? I think on the Conservative side, the betting scandal, it just incredible. I think we touched on it post the podcast last week off air. Just the fact that people think that they can outwit the betting companies, who've got elaborate systems to look for patterns and look for irregularities. And I think, there's something there. Again, nothing has been proven, but there is enough. The fact that all of a sudden, I think I read somewhere that for one of the major betting companies, they had been taking around sort of 30-40 pounds a day in total bets on when would the general election be, suddenly took 6,000 pounds in multiple bets, a couple of days before Rishi announced it out loud. It suggests somebody knew something. Again, there's lies, damn lies, and
Yeah,
statistics.
yeah, but I think
But,
you've frozen again, by the way.
sorry.
I think the more harmful, the weird thing was it wasn't the actual, like so many things in politics, it wasn't the actual, they put some money on the date of the election, because in most of the cases, to be honest with you, the amount of money that we're talking about is pretty negligible. I think one of them was quite a high amount, or it certainly would be from my bank account. It wasn't so much that they did it. It was actually the decision of how it was. Oh yeah, the betting commission will be investigating that. We did that. I'm sorry. That's like if you're an employer and one of your employees has been arrested and is being investigated for something, and has been released on bail. Sorry, to listeners, that this is Twilight. This is one of my cats. Twilight, what do you think about the gambling scandal? Obviously, she's completely not bothered now. So it's the prevarication of, oh no, well, we can't speak about that because the gambling commission are waiting to rule it. No, if you're an employer and you have an employee that, and I know that it's not an employer-employee relationship, but I'm just using that as an example. Then if someone else is investigating them for something, you suspending them while that investigation is being undertaken does not in any way prejudice the outcome of that investigation. That's complete nonsense. And that, I think, if anything, was what just made it go on and on and on, and presumably made people dig deeper and find more of them. So
yeah, and again, you talk about the sums of money involved. There's some of them are reasonable sums of money, but they're not life-changing money. It's just that it's that. And I think when we spoke about it off air last week, you said it's like the Tesco manager taking 20 quid from the till.
Why would
It's not going to change your life, but
it's
potentially
going to ruin it?
could destroy your career. So,
You'd have to
don't be that stupid.
Yeah, you'd either have to be really, really stupid or really, really arrogant to think that it doesn't matter. Sorry, you'd have to be really, really stupid to think either you're not going to get caught or it's unimportant, or arrogant enough to think that even if you got caught, that it's irrelevant and you can kind of just do things. So I just love how my camera is automatically trying to keep Twilight in the shot every time she kind of looks up. It's trying.
This is
keep her
excellent.
face in frame.
I guess if we move on to the second sort of scandal of last week, was obviously
the Channel 4 documentary.
The Channel 4.
Yes, so the Channel 4 news piece where they'd done some undercover videoing with some candidates, with some campaigners in Clacton, one of whom turned out to be someone that they recorded on film saying some very racist and derogatory, we're using some racist slurs about Rishi Sunak and some other kind of awful language about things that army recruits could be doing, basically on the cliffs of Dover, waiting for people in small boats to come to shore. So that came to light. It came to light on the same day that there was the BBC Question Time debate that was kind of the also rans of the one that happened the week before. So it was Nigel Farage and what the other co-leader of the Greens, and Farage fielded lots of questions from the audience, basically about that, which he claims is was a put-up job and is political interference, and there's and the chap apparently that's in the videos is apparently an actor, but I think his claim was that he basically had been a put-up job by, if not Channel 4, then by someone else, and Channel 4 have stood by their claims. But it's certainly dominated the themes of the questions and the nature of the discussion that he had. But if you were on the other side of that, you could also think, well, to be fair, as a party that, and we're going to start talking about polls in a second, but as a party that have gained in popularity in the polls, they haven't had as much exposure or had as much interrogation about their candidates or indeed about their policies as other parties have had to experience. But it is, you could argue that timing wise, it's is that a deliberate thing, or is it just that it was uncovered because these things were happening and it's just about to be an election and that's why there was the attention? It's do you know what I mean? It's,
Well, I think
because did this thing happen because of this thing, or did this thing happen but because of another thing? But I guess there is only one true answer. Either it's a put-up job, but it isn't.
Well, and I think that for me, Simon, that there's an element of, it does rather speak to the sort of whole post-truth narrative, and we won't dwell too long on it. But it was like, there was an element of, and we've all got confirmation bias. I've been very critical of reform and their contract pledge to abolish the Equalities Act. That has not landed well with me. So I was quite comfortable to believe that those sorts of people are within reform, and that's not saying that everybody within reform holds those views. Far from it. But I think there is a spectrum, and I think that there are people on the far right who go beyond what's in the contract and extrapolate that out in terms of xenophobia. At the same time, when Nigel declared it all to be, fake news, well, the person's an actor. Well, I accept that they're an actor. That's the truth. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not what they're not delivering their views and their beliefs on camera. So as you say, we'll rumble on, and I guess that brings us up to today, and we've had a little look at the final weekend in terms of polls and opinion polls and percentages of votes. And so I guess the key question, the biggest of big questions, is who's going to win on Thursday. And there is, from a statistical modelling standpoint and from a number of sources, Labour are going to win on Thursday.
I will be a very shocked bunny if they don't. But I think as much as and I guess this is why the Conservatives have kept using this fallacious supermajority narrative, which is A, just not how our politics work, and B, they didn't seem to be bothered about it in 2019 when they had an 80-seat majority.
Well, and I think, Simon, we'll come on to that, to the how much the share of the pie that everybody gets. But I guess one of the, it's trendy at the moment to look at bookmakers and odds. So it's exactly what I did.
Okay.
And so if you approached the bookmakers today and you placed £41 on Labour to win the most number of seats, should you be successful in that bet, you will receive back £42, including your stake. So the bookmakers are so certain that the kind of the Labour Party are going to win, they are offering you no odds at all. It's as close to being a certainty as you're liable to get in a betting market.
Okay, well, just in case anyone was going to be betting on the on the outcome of the election, yeah, I mean, short of Keir Starmer kicking a puppy down Whitehall, I don't know quite how how Sunak could pull it out at this point. I don't know whether the news about the the stuff from Channel 4 gets encourages the more centrist Conservatives to remember to vote because they want to stand by those the values, that those things that are in that report, that they don't agree with those things being said, and the country's moved on from that sort of racist narrative. I don't know whether that happens, but yeah, I can't see kind of a lot kind of happening. I think at this point it's about it's surely about getting out to making sure that the people that told you they're going to vote, getting them to vote, and anything you can do at this point that's gonna convince people that weren't going to be voting for you that it's not worth actually. You don't want to bother voting. It's a done thing, love. You do no point. Don't go to the ballot. Oh, you don't want to go to the ballot box. Yeah, I think that's the thing. So you can kind of see that emerging narrative of from the Labour side, look, complacency is our enemy. It's not a done deal until we start getting the results on the from July the 4th. We're fighting for every vote, etc., etc. A similar sort of narrative from the Lib Dems of no, we're not going to be discussing the C word. We're not going to be talking about those sorts of things. We're not going to be kind of they're saying that they're not going to be kind of trapped into kind of making comments about preparing to be prime minister, because that's just not, let's be honest, that's just not going to happen. It's numerically impossible. And the Conservatives are kind of sitting on the don't give, basically everything's too fragile. Don't give Labour a super majority. Don't give them too much power.
Yes,
and it's it just seems a bit of a. I don't think we're in any other place than we were on the 22nd of May. I can see from the poll of polls that the dial has changed slightly for the parties from the 22nd. But it's not kind of changed a massive amount. At the end of the day,
no.
is the overwhelming feeling of the nation that they're not necessarily racing towards another party with open arms and love in their eyes. They're just running away from the party that's currently in power.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of the narrative has been about has been an anti-conservative narrative, and I kind of understand that as the party in power. The interesting piece in terms of when we look at we'll go on to seat distribution in a minute, is that there is actually a very pro move towards Labour, because it's not just in England where the Conservatives are obviously going to take a shellacking. And there is I'm not denying there's a big move away, but things do not look great for the SNP in Scotland either. So you've got a situation where it's been pretty much, as you say, rock solid. Labour's got about 40% of the vote. The Conservatives have got 20. The SNP have bounced about a bit and alleged at times, that some polls have put them as high as sort of 20, 21. At the moment, they're sort of down around 16 with Labour. With the Lib Dems with 11%. But interesting when you look at, obviously, first past the post. So in terms of the number of seats predicted, I've used two sources. One is The Economist, the well-respected magazine, that have used a kind of deep statistical model to look constituency by constituency, and I'm not going to name them, Simon, don't panic, to see where those seats will end up going. And then the other website, which uses a similar but different technique, is a website called Electoral Calculus. If you're very keen to go and look at statistical modelling, look at both. And so I've looked at both of their models, and in a statistically completely irrelevant way, I've taken the midpoint of both and averaged them out. So if we look at Labour, because we think Labour currently they have 197 seats. The calculus team are giving them 465.
Yeah.
The economists are giving them 434. So that averages out at 450 seats. So they will more than double their seats. The opposite is true for the Conservatives. So the Conservatives currently have 376 seats. Electoral Calculus give them just 65, so losing 300 seats. The economists are slightly more chipper and reckon they're going to get 106. Now, again, if we look back at our friends, the bookmakers, who are kind of usually on this kind of arrangement, the bookmakers are kind of sitting on the fence and saying, well, it's an even money bet. It's 50-50 as to whether the Conservatives get more than 100 seats. So at the moment, it is looking like an unmitigated disaster. The SNP currently have 48 seats, and I mentioned at the start, the kind of predictions for them are 18 and 20. So again, they're looking to lose potentially half their seats. Now, as a Lib Dem, you'll probably be chuffed that despite the fact you've only got 11% of the vote, the predictions are currently you've got 8, and that will rise to either 71. I think Calculus are feeling more positive towards the Lib Dems than the Economists, who are saying 48. But if it's somewhere between there, you're going to end up with roughly 60 seats for 11% of the vote. And last, by no means least, our friends in Reform, who with 16% of the vote, then the kind of, again, the calculus team are more optimistic for them, think they'll get 6. The economists think they'll get 2. So they're going to probably end up around 4. With the Greens and Plaid and the parties from Northern Ireland, I think the statistical modelling, when you get down to that smaller vote share, kind of doesn't really work. And I think in the majority of cases, it's sort of plus or minus 1 seat from where they are currently. So I guess, unless something revolutionary happens between now and Thursday, it looks like it is going to be the landslide of all landslides for Labour.
I think that's likely, but I'd repeat that probably I don't know. I'm scarred by political events that occurred in the not too distant past, where a lot of people assumed that everyone else was going to be voting a particular way and therefore didn't necessarily turn out to vote a particular way, and gave it to the other side. So I would just emphasize that you cannot be certain. The only way you can be certain that you're contributing to getting the result that you're after is to actually go and vote for it. So, and whoever that might be, and whatever reasons you might have for doing it, this is your only chance to contribute. If you do not vote, please do not moan over the next 5 years that you don't like what happens in the country, because you had your choice. You
did have your chance. So there we have it. So we are now thundering towards Thursday, and because we are reckless, feckless in the extreme, we're going to be broadcasting live, keeping you company through the night, and with a network of roving reporters as well, Simon.
Indeed, yes. So from the very early hours of July the 5th, there probably isn't a reason, to be honest, to go live earlier, before midnight on July the 5th. We will be at Portsmouth Guildhall doing our live stream of the count for Portsmouth North and Portsmouth South. But we have also reached out to friends of the podcast who will be attending the various counts in the area, in the region around Portsmouth. So Havant, Fairham, Waterlooville, Gosport. I feel like I've left one out.
No, that's them at the moment.
And we've asked them to those friends of the pods that are able to feed us basically give us some updates as to what the tone is, what the feeling is, how things are feeling, or when they start getting kind of news about when the results are going to be expected. So we hope to feed in some information from those local counts, as well as just focusing obviously on Portsmouth. They'll either be able to join us live on the stream via telephone or by the online link that we use. So either way, we'll be able to get them to kind of contribute that way. But if you are someone that's going to be at one of the counts, or indeed one of the other counts in the area, then please, by all means, if you'd like to contribute something on election night to our broadcast, then please do give us an email at studio@pppodcast.uk. That's studio@pppodcast.uk. Or you can message us on Facebook, or contact us on X or LinkedIn, or you know where we are. So just kind of give us a bell. But it's going to be an interesting night. It's our first general election coverage. So it will be interesting.
Caffeinated beverages, jelly sweets at the ready. This will be our third live from the count broadcast, and each time the amount of equipment that Simon takes gets lesser, and the amount of calories that we take increases. So we are giving some applied learning. So final reminder, as Simon has said, the only way that you get to be miserable or cheerful on Friday is if you cast your vote. So get out and do it on Thursday. And you've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And I've been Simon Sansbury. And don't forget, you will need that photo ID to vote in person on Thursday. Polls will open from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. if you are registered to vote by post, and you cannot get it back to the place that you need to send it back to by the end, basically by the deadline that they've given you, you can drop it into any polling station in the constituency. So do bear that in mind. But again, please look, whatever future you want, you've got to go out there and vote for it. That's the whole point. Thanks for watching the show. Do make sure you like, follow, subscribe, comment, share, etc., so that we know what your thoughts are, because our opinions are definitely not the only ones available. And we'd love to hear what you've got to say, and we'd love you to join us when we start streaming in the early hours, the very early hours, probably not long after midnight on July the 5th, when we start talking about what's happening during the count. And it'll all be over by that point. It'll all be over. All of this exciting 6 weeks gone, done,
gone
in the hands of the voters. So join us next time on the Pompey Politics Podcast, which will be around midnight on July the 5th. See you then. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Pompey Politics Podcast. Don't forget to like, follow and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Don't forget that bell notification icon so you get your notification when we're next live. We usually go live 6:27 p.m. on a Sunday evening. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Threads, LinkedIn. Don't forget to have a look at our website, where you can find details of all of our previous and upcoming shows. That's pppodcast.uk, pppodcast.uk. Thank you. Feel free to leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and you can even ask Alexa to play the podcast for you. Alexa, play the latest episode of the Pompey Politics Podcast.
Getting Pompey Politics Podcast from Amazon Music.
Alexa,
Playing the latest episode.
stop. See? It's easy.